Okay, we're gonna get started. First off, I want to thank Christine for answering all of our questions and offering her expertise tonight. It's really awesome. We cannot express enough how grateful we are for our partnership with Trout Unlimited and their trust in us in not only furthering our parameters, but our data over the past few years. And Christine has been a really big part of that partnership. So we're very grateful. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be accompanying Christine's presentation by talking about our citizen science involvement in monitoring everything in relation to the dam removal from 2018 to 2022. Again, I'm Brooke Bauer. I'm WEN's citizen science coordinator. I followed the steps of Asa Wise, our former stream team coordinator, who set a really strong foundation for all of this monitoring. And I'm co-presenting today with Steffi Novak, our stream team coordinator. And then Deb is in the back and Kat. Cool.
Fantastic. So, of course, we got a beautiful overview of the dam project from Christine, so we're going to very briefly brush over this. I hope you guys are paying attention because we're not going to go over all of what Christine was mentioning with the dam removal itself. But we were really grateful that we were able to get so many citizen scientists and volunteers out with us to do a lot of this monitoring with us. And there's a couple of you in the field, in the crowd today, not field anymore, but hi Abe, nice to see you. I think there's some on Zoom as well. Great to have you guys. Yeah, volunteers have been kind of the backbone of our volunteer base, the backbone of the work that we've been able to do here. And so it's been extremely important to have them out with us. And yeah, we couldn't have done this monitoring that we'll be sharing with you guys tonight. So just a little bit of background on WEN and how we got into citizen science. So when WEN started, we were mostly focused toward youth and school engagement. And we made kind of the switch over into citizen science in the recent years. So in about 2017, we were working out in Lolo. There was a big fire out there, and that was our first kind of taste of bringing professional or like higher level protocols into our sort of field activities. So taking these same programs that we were teaching kids and making these programs so much more, just much better science so that we could actually share that data with partners and actually use it as valuable scientific data. And so in 2018, when talks were going around on the dam removal, who was going to monitor what pieces, we were very grateful to be invited to the table to kind of discover which pieces we could be monitoring and how to kind of help put data forward towards kind of the reports they were working on and informing a bit of the impacts of that dam removal. And we were really lucky that during COVID, a lot of other organizations were kind of hit hard because of their volunteer bases like that. But it actually gave us a wonderful opportunity to make that switch from working in the schools towards working mostly towards citizen science. So we were able to put a lot more of our focus towards citizen science because we couldn't really be in the schools as much, but being out in the field was really great for us.
And a huge part of being out in the field was, and our programs, is our citizen scientists. So we are so grateful for our volunteers, and they help us collect all of this data, and we couldn't exist without them, basically. And we've been thrilled in the amount of participation we've had over the past few years. I mean, from 2019 to 2022, we've nearly seen like a double in our volunteer participation, which is pretty amazing, with a total of 187 volunteers putting in more than 2,000 hours working and collecting this data. And with that kind of influx in participation, we have, like Steffi said, and as we will continue to say, we've put so much work into strengthening our protocols, our parameters, our data, our equipment, and making sure that it's as shareable as possible. And that includes creating an online platform or a web base to store our data and make it as shareable as possible to our partners. So thank you to our volunteers for making this happen. We so appreciate you.
So we're going to be going into a bit of the exact parameters that we were monitoring up in the Rattlesnake. So our stream team goes out every Sunday throughout the fall from about the end of August until about the middle of November, right until the snow kind of stops us from being out in the creek anymore. And these are the parameters that we sample when we're out in the field each day. So we do our chemistry. We look at dissolved oxygen, pH, air temperature, and water temperature. We collect aquatic insects, macroinvertebrates in the stream to tell us about the stream health. We sample cross sections, looking at the shape of the stream bed. Velocity, allowing us to look at speed of the water over time, and along with cross sections, we can map out how much water is going down the creek at any given time. And we also look at pebble counts, so looking at the bottom of the stream bed and kind of what that looks like. And we're actually able to take all of these parameters and train volunteers that have either been out in the field a ton or have never been out in the field, and train them on these parameters so that they can collect really valuable scientific data.
Cool. And so this is our level 1 site map where we have all of these monitoring activities. We have 10 sites. I'm going to just point them out because it's kind of hard to see. So this is the dam removal site, and we have 10 sites. You can see both located above and below the dam site, and that's supposed to give us as much variation as possible in our data. And you can see it's kind of getting into the recreation boundary a little bit, and or not quite to the wilderness boundary, but it is pretty great to have that many sites and have all of our citizen scientists being able to come out with us and collect that data in such a big scope.
So like Christine was mentioning earlier, we didn't actually see a lot of impacts from the dam removal or just changes over time throughout our monitoring, which is what we were kind of hoping to see. But of course, there's no way for us to know that this is what we would have found unless we had been out there monitoring. And so it was really important that we were able to do this monitoring throughout this whole process, so that now we can come to you guys and say, yes, we were monitoring, we did keep an eye on this, and we didn't really see many bad impacts from that dam removal. And so these are just a couple of fun facts throughout our field seasons. Over these last couple of years while we've been monitoring, we've had volunteers out from when it was about 34 degrees. So right now that seems pretty warm, but during the fall, it feels a bit chilly, and all the way up to 88 degrees. So we've had folks out in all temperatures, all weathers, some really hardy folks coming out when it's absolutely pouring rain and still coming out to collect data with us. And they've collected over 11,000 macroinvertebrates, collected them and ID'd them in the field, and walked over 4,000 feet of cross sections, measuring every single foot as they went. And so it's just a huge impact that just having so many volunteers have been able to help us just gather this wonderful data set.
So as Christine and Steffi kind of mentioned here, we haven't seen that much variation in many of our parameters, but we are so excited to be monitoring these. And one of the examples we wanted to give is our sediment size distribution monitoring, aka pebble counts. This is looking at the base of the creek and looking at the different sediment on it. So we used the gravelometer here, a fun device that we use to gauge the size of different substrate that compose the creek bed. And this is really important for bioindicators like fish, for spawning, for macroinvertebrates, specifically, for example, like thinking about caddisflies and where they make their cases from. Substrate and materials like this are really important to be monitoring. And these are just two graphs here. You can see looking below the dam site and above the dam site, we have a kind of taking these practices into the data where we have before dam removal in blue here and after in red. And you can see that there's a really small variation between both of those monitoring efforts. And we haven't seen a significant change in substrate size. But we're really excited to move forward and see different parameters or different ways of monitoring sediment moving forward, because there are so many different ways. This is only one of many, and it's kind of dependent on if we end up seeing another major flood event and what ends up happening in the Rattlesnake Creek.
The sites above the dam, are those above the impact area or within?
Yes. So sorry, I should clarify. These are representing one site above and one site below the dam. So this is not a summary of all of our sites above and below. It's just one above and one below. Good question. Thanks for asking. Our specialized stream team is something that has evolved as our citizen science projects have developed as well. And a lot of different programs have materialized in the process. Our advanced macro ID is one of those, which Steppy briefly talked about our level 1 monitoring. So this takes it a step further and we get a controlled sample of macroinvertebrates using a server sampler. And then we send them to Riparian for professional ID. We also have vegetation surveys, which help us gauge what shrubs, tree cover, and is happening around the dam site, both above and below. And then we also have our large woody debris monitoring, which I'm going to go into more depth with. So our large woody debris monitoring is gauging aquatic habitat, right? So we have a lot of different ways that we try to cover as much stream ground as possible within our programs. And you can kind of see in the map right here, we have our teams reaching out pretty far, and Trout and Limited actually ends up going further. And we have our citizen science stream team who has been covering these reaches. And then our backcountry stream corps, which, as we mentioned in the intro, is 6 high school students who bike up into the backcountry and collect data on wood, logs, root wads, pools, all of this great habitat that is so great for fish and macroinvertebrates. And it's so important for us to gauge this, both above and below the dam site. And we're recruiting for a backcountry stream course soon. So if you know anyone, let us know.
Right, so one of the other ways that we kind of monitor riparian habitats, of course, large woody debris is looking at wood in the stream. We have vegetation surveys. We're looking at the riparian habitat. So there's vegetation along those stream banks. And so we go out to 4 sites above and 4 sites below that restoration area at the dam site. And we sample ground cover, tree cover, and shrub cover throughout those sites. And so we use these really nice meter square sampling squares, and we are able to sample ground cover within those squares like that. And we're able to look at a lot of that vegetation for long-term impacts. So a lot of the monitoring that we did for this project, while we did do it during 2020 and 2021, so while the dam is being removed and then after, it really acts as a good baseline for us moving into the future. And so if we're following along with TU, going in that 5 or 10 year time scale, that's when we're kind of expecting to look at more changes in this riparian vegetation. Because of course, plants don't really change from year to year as much, but every 5 years, every 10 years, we're more likely to see some of these larger impacts. And looking at those changes along the stream bed, we can also look at riparian, like recreation pressure. So people going down and accessing the creek, maybe going over that vegetation and trampling it, looking at invasive and noxious weed spread, and as well as any other sort of effects on vegetation along those stream banks. And so this is kind of a quick random snippet of the data that we gathered. So this is looking at ground cover. And so when we say ground cover, it's about plants that are about yay high. Other than that, we start getting into shrubs, and that's a whole separate measurement. And so this is looking at these 2 bars on the left. This is the below dam. This is during the removal, below dam after the removal. And these are above the dam, both before and after the removal, or during the removal, I should say. And so this is looking at the percent cover. So if you had a square, what percentage of that is plants? What percentage of that is litter, like leaves or pine needles, and what percent is bare ground? And so you can kind of see that, as in those 2 columns on the left there, it didn't really change from 2020 to 2021, either below or above, but there was kind of a difference between below and above. And we actually saw that in some of our other data as well. There's just more trees the further up away from the city that you get. And so there's more trees to put down more leaves, more pine needles. And so we saw a much larger kind of litter layer there. And so this is just kind of a piece of what that data looks like. but we're able to take this as a sort of baseline going into the future. And so we'll be able to put up 5-year or 10-year data onto there and kind of see if there's any sort of long-term impacts along our sites. So one of the other really exciting pieces of data that we sample is our aquatic macroinvertebrates. So macroinvertebrates are extremely important for monitoring river health. So they're actually bioindicators. So the presence or absence of certain species tell us a lot about the health of the stream. And so we sample those in 2 ways. One is our more basic with Stream Team. We take a net that is just kind of like a fishing net, it's a D net, and we sample about 50 feet of stream, just kind of within that area. We take those bugs and our citizen scientists actually ID those in the field and return them to the stream at the end of the day. And then we have our level 2 sampling, which, as Brooke was mentioning earlier, is done with what's called a SERPA sampler. It allows us to sample 1 square foot of stream and get all of the bugs from within that area. And we take the bugs from that net, put them in a little jar, and we send them off to Riparian. Riparian is a professional lab in Missoula that actually IDs those insects down to species for us, and then makes a really nice list of every single species they found, and then gives it back to us to kind of do with what we will. And we were able to, with the help of Sam Turner over at the University of Montana, make these really beautiful graphs showing us some of the results that we were seeing from that level 2, that higher level insect collection. So this is a lot of graphs, a lot of words. I'm going to kind of walk you guys through what these mean. So you saw that one on the left during Christine's presentation. So that is looking at the sediment tolerant insects at the sites. So both the DS is downstream, US is upstream. So that graph is looking at before, during, and after the dam removal, both downstream and upstream. What were the effects downstream and upstream during that dam removal? And like Christine was saying, we saw that little tiny spike in the middle piece there. So in this chunk, you see that we saw an increase in sediment tolerant species, but it went right back down kind of the next year. And so that's showing us that there may have been a small pulse of fine sediments from that dam removal, likely when the channel was switched over. But any impacts that had were very quickly kind of fixed during the next year. And so that scale is also extremely small. So even that difference was only a matter of maybe 1 to 3%. And so these graphs on the left, on the right here, I find are extremely interesting. So this was looking at bugs both above and below the dam, but also at that dam removal site. So of course we couldn't sample macroinvertebrates there before the dam removal because our nets are only so tall, our people are only so tall, and it's kind of hard to sample at a dam site when there's a whole bunch of water there. So we went back once the dam was switched over and we were able to sample in the new stream bed there. And we collected these samples both, of course, above and below and at the site, and then looked at the number of species. So that's taxa richness is just the number of species that we found. And then the percent scraper and shredder, this graph on the right, is what species are feeding off of like litter or algae. And so we see less species at the dam site, and the species that we did find were more likely to live off of algae or litter than kind of any of the other food sources. And so that's really interesting because all of the insects that we found at the dam site had to recolonize that site. So when the dam was switched over, it was a dry channel, and then the water came rushing down. And so there were no insects there during that actual building process, because of course, there was just bare ground. And so all these insects had to go from either upstream or downstream back into this site. So this is really exciting for us going into this next year of sampling, because we're going to be able to look at the data that's currently sitting at Riparian and the data that we'll collect this year. And we'll hopefully be able to see that number of species go up and kind of have all of our results go right back into each other, just having everything kind of mellow out, just so that that dam site really gets all the restoration that it needs. And we'll be able to see that through with this recolonization. So one more fun graph involving bugs, because we all love the bug graphs. This one, I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you're really nerdy about graphs and you really want to know exactly what went into this, you can definitely email us. I would love to sit down and give you the whole spiel about it, but most folks don't want that whole spiel. So we're not going to go over too much detail, but this was a great chance for us to compare our level 1 sampling, having volunteers identify insects, and the level 2, when we had professionals going out and IDing the same sorts of macroinvertebrates from the same site. So all of these insects were collected at that dam restoration area. That graph on the left there is just level 1. We split it into 4 little groups. So for level 1, we normally collect 300 macroinvertebrates during a day. We split that 300 out into 4 separate tables. And so each table got their own little chunk of bugs that they got to ID. And then our level 2, we had our classic sample that got sent to Riparian. So we were able to figure out what percentage of those samples were our big 3 species, or big 3 taxa, I should say, mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, and then other. And so we were able to look at what the difference is in what sorts of species we were finding with each method. And when we compared these 2 methods, the difference between the 2 methods was about 3%. The difference between the 4 level 1 samples was almost 6. And so while we have a lot more data collection that would need to go into making this really solid and publishable, we can be kind of led into the assumption that we have really good and really valuable data, and that most of this variation that we were seeing was just because of sampling in 1 square foot versus over 50 feet of stream. And so it's mostly due to the environment rather than our methods. And so we're able to see that citizen science is really a valuable form of data collection. And we're able to take folks that have come out with us once or twice, or maybe even never, and still collect and ID the same sorts of macroinvertebrates as if we were sending them off to a professional lab. We might not get as much detail, but in the broad scope of things, we're seeing the same things with each group. And so this really does a lot of good for our organization, because we are focused mostly on citizen science. And then this kind of shows us that, yes, we're on the right path. All the citizen science is looking good, and we can continue on into the future, looking more at these sort of differences, but it shows us that we're doing a very good job with our data collection.
Yeah, so this is really exciting to see how much change that has happened over the past few years. And a lot of this has been materialized into these reports, where you can learn more about our data. Like Christine said, WEN has had the opportunity and the privilege to be featured in the UC Davis Center for Community and Citizen Science, where their citizen science model on the rattlesnake in relation to dam removals. We have had the opportunity to work with partners from there who have just been so instrumental in strengthening our citizen science parameters. Our data can also be found in the Rattlesnake Creek Dam Removal Monitoring 2021 report that Christine also mentioned. And if you want to learn more, even more about everything that we talked about today, you can go there. And as Christine said, it's pretty digestible. It's just a little bit lengthy. And those are all on our website at montanawatershed.org under resources and then under publications. So we're really excited about those. Those partnerships are so important to us. So from that, there's a lot of big takeaways that has been evolving with Stream Team over time. And there's 3 specifically that we want to highlight. First, partnerships are just so essential to us. We have had the opportunity to work with so many amazing professional scientists, community members who offer different things and bring different things to the table that allow for us to grow and develop and produce the best data possible. We want to continue meeting that and growing those partnerships. Another thing is our community impact, which is the kind of intangible part of WEN that you can't see really. I mean, I guess we can see here. You guys are all here today, which is great. Thanks for coming. But our citizen scientists, when they're out in the creek, it's really cool to see how much they care about their watershed. So we're not only collecting this really great data, but we're also formulating a place-based connection to their watersheds and teaching them more about what's going on and expanding the scope of who gets to participate in science. And that is a pretty awesome thing. And of course, we're always wanting to improve, and we welcome feedback, and partnerships are essential to us in making sure we continue to develop. And there's always room for growth. We want to continue furthering our parameters and working with partners to make our stream team stronger. So on that note, we are on the hunt we're expanding for community partners. So if you know anyone who would be interested, put them in contact with us or have them visit our website at montanawatershed.org.
So of course, after hearing about all this wonderful data collection that we're doing, you're sitting there wondering to yourself, how can I get involved in this? Well, this is how I'm get involved in this. So stream monitoring, at least for us, is an ongoing process. It's something that changes year to year, and so we're able to go out every year and keep an eye on how those changes are occurring. And we do that through a lot of our citizen science programs. And so we have those, of course, coming up this year. Once the snow starts to melt is when we start to get rolling. So we have our groundwater monitoring in Greenhill Park, starting somewhere around April or May. Groundwater monitoring is those 15 wells I was mentioning earlier. They're about yay big around, metal, and flush to the ground. So they're covered in ice right now, but once the ice melts, we're going to be back out there monitoring those guys. And we do that monthly all throughout the season until the snow covers them back up. We also have our vegetation surveys coming up in June. We have our level 1 sampling throughout those 10 sampling sites every Sunday, starting at the end of August, going to about the middle of November. We're also working on recreation surveys, piloting some fine sediment surveys, and continuing our large wooded debris monitoring in the Rattlesnake and hopefully other areas in the coming years. And the good thing is, with all this monitoring, you don't have to have a background in it. It helps if you do. Of course, we'd love folks that come to us with the experience already, but we love to take folks that have no experience and show them the really fantastic time of learning how to do citizen science and getting your hands kind of in the creek collecting data. And so if you have no experience at all, we'll also train you on that. And so you're more than welcome on any of these guys. You can look at our website. We have a volunteer application that just lets us get a little background. But when we get close to the field season, we'll have signups for each of these specifically. And if you're on our newsletter, you'll see those kind of popping up as things you can come out on. And you're more than welcome to join us for any of those.
Cool. And of course, we have to thank all of our partners, the Open Rivers Fund and Resource Legacy Fund, supported by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for all of whom supports the stream team. We also want to thank Montana Fish, Wildlife and Park, our partners from Trout Unlimited, the City of Missoula Parks and Rec, and of course, UC Davis for Center for Community and Citizen Science. And of course, David Cole, who was our scientific advisor, he was really instrumental in developing these parameters and making sure that our protocols met up to standard and aligned with a lot of Trout Unlimiteds and made that data usable. And then, of course, again, Asa Wise, who set a really awesome foundation and is just an amazing person, and we love her. Cool. Again, join us for our next speaker series with Sarah Holden at the University of Montana, where we'll be learning about wetland climate resiliency. And you can sign up for that on our website, where you can also sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, so we have this list of upcoming events again. We do have all of these on our website. And so we have our speaker series coming up. We have Sarah Holden in February. We'll have another one in March. We have another presentation in March. But our last speaker series of the year will be in April. That'll be Lad Notek from Fish, Wildlife and Parks. If you haven't heard him speak, he's a fantastic guy. And so if you probably, since you're here tonight, you have signed up. If you have not, you can definitely sign up on our website, but you probably click the box of, hey, I can talk to these ones, and we'll send you a reminder when that comes along. We also really want to highlight in February, on the 25th, West Slope Trout Unlimited is holding their annual banquet at 6 p.m. little baby plug for our partners here. Book a table, book a seats, or come volunteer with WEN on that night as we're helping out. Those sort of events really help raise funds for programs, including WEN, and just kind of help other folks to do all the great work that we're able to do.
We'll take questions. Any questions for us or Christine that came up?
I'm curious about your, like the huge growth in terms of number of volunteers engaged. And do you think that that was COVID related? Was that marketing on your part? Was it because there was the rattlesnake to focus on? What drove that?
I think it was a bit of everything. So Christine's asking what kind of drove that huge increase in volunteers. And yeah, because it went from about 200 people a year up to, I think, over 500. It was a huge jump in people. And I think that was a bit COVID related, but a lot of it was the dam removal and the sort of outreach that we were able to do around that. So a lot of folks heard about the dam removal and decided to get interested from there. And another big part is we have a huge partnership with the University of Montana. And so every year we go to a lot of their events. We do their welcome feast in the beginning of the year. And so we have a lot more classes that we're able to work with there through both that welcome feast and professors actually inviting us into their classes. And so that's really helped us to gain a lot more volunteers as they've heard about us through school or heard about us from the community and kind of joined us from there. Mm-hmm. So we actually went to, I think it was 3 university classes this year, joined us for various field activities. Their whole class just kind of filtered in. We don't include class numbers into that volunteer count. So it's probably much higher if we did include the 30-person EVST class that sampled stream team. But
yeah, we get a lot of retention from the university. Mm-hmm. For sure.
I would also add the Westlope chapter, Trout Unlimited, and the School of Fly Gals send people our way.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there anything particularly surprising that you found from this? It seems like generally the data is not surprising, but were there some things that were?
I think overall it was the data that we were hoping to see. Because of course, if you're removing a dam, you're hoping for those impacts that Christine was saying, the beneficial ones. But of course, we were looking at mostly the negative impacts. So we were hoping to see nothing. I think the one that I was really interested in was that comparison of our methods. That kind of dropped into our lap. We had the opportunity to do that increased those level 2 samples that we sent off to Riparian, and thought, hey, this would make a great public outreach event. We made it into a whole day at the dam. When we first did that, we actually also brought up folks at the university through their eDNA. And so it was a huge learning opportunity, but being able to kind of compare our methods and seeing them so close, we knew we were doing kind of the right thing, but seeing them so close was a nice surprise for us.
Mm-hmm. And our macroinvertebrate, like Christine and Steffi said, the sediment tolerant, we only saw a very small variation. And so that was probably the most notable impacts that we saw. But again, that was on a very small scale.
I think one of the great benefits of citizen science is its social effects that it has, that people get involved in their community, hands-on, and they tend to think about environmental issues differently and maybe behave differently. And I'm curious, if you have $500, this is like a great case to actually use some social science research and to understand the demographics of volunteer base and how they might shift in the
Totally. That's a really good question. Every year we kind of gauge the responses from our citizen scientists. We've done stakeholder surveys in the past to kind of gauge how public opinion has maybe changed or what people are caring about. But yeah, I totally agree. I think that citizen science has a really big opportunity for creating a space or platform for public discussion about big environmental issues like climate change or things with what's going on with our water. So it is, we have multiple different ways that we're trying to, and the stakeholder survey is really important. And otherwise we just try to facilitate discussions on the creek as much as possible.
We actually had the opportunity to look more into that this year. Some of our volunteers, we had a nice survey that got sent out from MSU. That was partnering with a bunch of other water quality monitoring groups. I think Trout Unlimited or one of the other groups in Missoula also. Either way, they put together a survey that does exactly what you're looking about. And yet they have questions on how long have you volunteered with this group and what are your opinions about these certain topics. And they actually put that all together into a really big report that we should be getting in a few months here once they kind of finish working it all up. But yeah, we're really excited to see that come out and see what kind of results those are kind of gathering for us.
Will that be separated out? Like, will you be able to pull the WEN data?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be able to pull just so the way that the report is structured, you can pull everybody's data, or you can pull just WEN's data. And we actually were able to work with them relatively closely. And they actually also put a question on there just for us of which program did you participate in? So we can see what the opinions are of somebody that went on stream team versus groundwater versus helped us on a youth program versus helped us with data entry in our office, and kind of see what those differences throughout the different programs.
And we'll make sure to share those with the community if you want to see them.
Yeah, if you're on our newsletter, we'll have that sort of stuff up there once it gets
Totally.
rolling.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
If any come up, feel free to email us at our emails right here. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Yep, sorry.
You're gonna tell us the best and worst weather.
The best and worst.
That's a tough one. I feel like the best and worst is very,
We definitely did some snowy groundwater monitoring this year,
yep.
which was fun. I had like 3 thermoses of hot water to pour on the wells to try to open them, which they ended up being fine to open without the water. Could make tea instead. It was harder to find them. Oh my gosh, yeah, we were digging. But yeah, we go out in a lot of different conditions. It's pretty fun.
I've been kind of wondering what's the difference between the stream team and the citizen science. It's kind of put together, but you have 2 different people in charge of things. So what's the difference?
So there's a reason that was a little confusing. That's because there's not really much of a difference. So Brooke and I work really closely with each other and actually do a lot of these programs together. If there's sometimes that we want to have enough folks to split a stream team, they can go into different places and each be led by one of us. But it's just having 2 experienced leaders out on an outing just for kind of a safety thing as well as a knowledge thing. So when we're out on stream team, so rewind exactly to your question though. Citizen science is the huge umbrella. It covers stream team, recreation surveys, groundwater, some of our youth and schools work. It's the big term for all of the work done by community members doing science that aren't necessarily actual like paid scientists that have like PhDs or something. And so a lot of our work falls kind of under that. And so Brooke and I are able to do this and go out with these groups like this because a lot of our stream team work, when I mentioned all those different parameters that we cover, we actually, a way that we make it really high quality data is we have somebody really trained leading each one of those stations. And so on a classic outing, I might be leading chemistry, Brooke might be leading cross sections, and then we actually have a gentleman named Al Pack join us from Riparian, who comes out and helps teach everyone how to ID the bugs. And so we have really experienced folks in each of these different stations. So we get that really high quality data while still being able to kind of engage and train volunteers. Did that clear as mud?
What we were talking like today, the program scope that we were looking at our level 1 stream team and our specialized stream team. And maybe this might help a little bit too, but we've created this kind of tiered, layered citizen science development structure for people to go into level 1 with having that kind of baseline knowledge of, we don't know necessarily where you're at, but we're going to facilitate and teach you through all these parameters. And then the specialized stream team is for people to kind of take the extra step and spend a whole day following one specific parameter, going more in depth, learning more about that. And that's a smaller group.
It was relevant to the sign up sheet where you had to say what you want to sign up for. I was just wondering what I signed up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And sometimes people like to go specifically into like the specialized stream team because they are studying, like they have a master's in fisheries or something and are wanting to get hands-on experience with surveying large woody debris aquatic habitat. So that's why we have that tiered system, but we do the same thing. Me and Steffi. Cool. Great. Thank you so much, y'all. And thank you, people on Zoom.
Yeah, you can shut the Zoom off. And if you're interested, you can always email us with any questions about any of our data, any of our programs, just random questions. We get a lot of like random questions and we're pretty good about putting